Hey there, good morning folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. If you remember last month, somewhere around the middle of April, we tested some of these Aguila mini shells. They look like that, using the Opsol mini clip in the Mossberg Shockwave. We ran a few through it to test it for reliability, and if you recall, it functioned pretty well. So knowing that they function well, using the mini clip from Opsol, which I will post a link to down there, you know, given that it's number 7.5 bird shot, the question in my mind is, what will it function well for? You know, typically speaking, your Mossberg Shockwave is not what most people consider a hunting weapon. You know, it's intended for defensive purposes, for a truck gun or a nightstand gun. So what I wanted to try to find out was, how would the reduced load that you have here with this Aguila mini shell, how's it gonna function in a real world kind of scenario? You know, if you had to use it for defense, would it work? Well, it would have been nice if I'd have had the camera rolling for that. That one was pretty good. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take the Mossberg Shockwave with its 14-inch barrel, smooth bore. We're going to take the number 7.5 Aguila mini shell. We're going to fire it at 7 yards on paper to see what kind of pattern we hold. Then we're going to fire it at a meat target to see what kind of damage it inflicts. Now, for those of you who don't know, the meat target is pork ribs covered with pork chops with a bag of oranges behind it to simulate soft tissue like lung tissue. More pork ribs on the back. The whole thing is going to be covered with a leather purse that my wife does not know that I used for this. I want to cover that up with 4 layers of t-shirt, and we're going to fire at that also at 7 yards. Figuring if it functions well at 7 yards, it would probably work well for most inside the house kind of distances that this test is really intended to determine. Aiming center mass at the bottom left target, you will see that it patterns just a little high. Speaking of that pattern, it's a pretty good one, probably only about 7 or 8 inches around, smaller than my hand. Alright, there's no political statement being made here, folks. I found that old t-shirt in a trash can where it belonged. Now the autopsy. Okay, so you can see here the impact on the purse at 7 yards is about a little smaller than my hand. There's a couple of straggler pellets, but the bulk of the pellets went through the middle right there. Opening up this bag here, it just destroyed that pork that was on the front of that. I mean, it's blown to smithereens. Where it got a hold of the oranges, look, there's the wad. It blew them to pieces. And it looks like most of the pellets wound up in the ribs on the back of the target. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that. One thing to note here, you can see where the impact went through these ribs on the front of the target and actually tore this rib loose from this one. All right, so what did we learn from all that? Well, I figured out when I shot the paper that Mossberg Shockwave with those rounds patterns real high. You may have seen that. So I had to adjust accordingly when I was shooting the he had it coming. All right, so now that's one thing you have to take into consideration is all shotguns shoot to a little different point of impact. You could have two identical shotguns and they might not shoot exactly the same. So you need to know where your shot's patterning at. That's important. And we figured out it was a little high, so I adjusted when I shot the meat target. Man, I was confident that that shot was not going to go through that meat target. I had no worries or qualms about it going all the way through the bag, which I showed you in the video that it did not. That being said, there was a couple of hay bales and about 4 foot of firewood behind that, so it was in a controlled environment. But I wasn't worried about trying to count pellets that made it through because I really didn't think that was going to happen. And moving on. Most of that shot stayed together in a pretty good, golf ball size group more than 3/4 of the way through that meat target. I mean, it blew through some very thick pork chops, some very robust, those weren't baby back ribs, those were the cheap spare ribs, and they were large, and you saw where it passed between two of the rib bones, but it just ripped that rack of ribs apart. And I mean, you can imagine what that would do to a thoracic cavity. It only got one of the oranges, but it literally tore it in half. So, I mean, is it the most powerful thing? No. But I certainly wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that. I'm not recommending or condoning the use of them for defense, but I think they'd work. Anyway, that's all I have. I'm going to try to get some more content out to y'all maybe next week. I've been burning my candle at both ends and haven't really had the time to devote to any of this, but I wanted to get this out to you today. I thought it was important. Anyway, take care. God bless.